Okay, I'm going to be chopping out a halving joint. Now, halving joints come in different, two main different types. Okay, you can have what's called a cross halving joint or a corner halving joint. This is my start off one for the cross halving joint, which we've all done in Skill Start Engineering Wood, right? Just going to remind you with this to help you plan the sequence when you're doing your planning sheets. Okay, so this is what I've cut. I'm going to show you how I went about doing it, right? So, first of all, select your wood carefully. This has got a big knot in the middle of it where I want to cut the wood out, and the knot runs right through the wood, so it's going to be very difficult to cut in that one. So I'm not going to do that one, I'm going to use this one instead, okay? Nice piece of CLS studding. This is kind of the studding that carpenter and joiner will use to make walls in a house. Pretty standard size really, fairly open grain, splits quite easily, so you have to be careful, right? Okay, first thing then, what you have to do is you have to get your marking out kit, right? This is a tri-square, remember? It's used for marking 90 degrees on timber. As long as you keep the stock, that's this bit made of rosewood and brass, against the side of the wood, it will always mark 90 degrees or perpendicular to the wood. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring that down across my timber, make a mark. We're not measuring anything, we're just practicing our cutting at the moment, right? Now my first cut is going to be along that line, but my cut only wants to go halfway down the wood. So to find halfway down the wood, we need to use one of these, which is called a marking gauge. The marking gauge has got a screw on the side of it and the bit in the middle, the stock section here that slides up and down. You can adjust it to any length you want, and you can set the distance by locking the thumb screw. Okay, I do what's called spike and set to set the middle of the wood. It's a little trick, but it's quite easy to use. First thing you have to do is align, so keep the stock of the marking gauge tight against the edge of the wood and align the spike with the center by eye, okay? Now you're not going to be exactly right first time round, you're just trying to estimate it, okay? So I've set it up by there and I spike to make a little dint in the wood. Now turn the wood around and put another spike mark in and see if they line up. Now if the two spike marks are, you know, bang on, like mine's pretty good there actually, to be honest, so I don't have to do much more on there. But if they're out, you just have to adjust slightly, even it up, spike and set again, turn it around, see whether the dots line up. So that's a good technique to use to do it by eye. So no measuring required. Now, hold your marking gauge as if it was an accelerator on a motorbike, and you'd try and decelerate, right? So what you're trying to do is you're going to rock it over until the spike digs into the wood, and then you're going to drag it down the edge of the wood. Keep the stock tight against the edge of the timber as you're doing that. Go turn the wood over and do the same on the other side. So I now have, if I put a pencil in them to make the line stand out a bit more, two grooves that go halfway down the timber. 1, 2, like this. Get your tri-square out again and mark a line that goes down to those bits like that. Okay, so I've now got a line that runs up and over the timber, two lines that go halfway down the wood that I've marked out using my marking gauge. Now I need to mark out the width of the timber. Well, my timber that's going into it, look, I can just take the size from the bit that's going to go into it. So I put that tight against the line that I've just drawn, and I draw a line on the other side of it, right next to the timber, and bring that line across to the other two like that. So my housing joint is marked. Sorry, my halving joint, my cross halving joint is marked out. Last thing to do before you go any further is to mark what we call the waste wood. Now marking the waste wood is a really good technique to get used to doing in case you have lots of lines on your timber and you get confused as to which ones are going and which ones are staying. So once you've done that, clamp your wood up. So when you clamp your wood up, if you're on a site, you will not have access to a vise. You might be using something like a workmate, or you might be clamping to a sawhorse. So clamp your wood so you can hold it safely. Get your tenon saw, so this is your tenon saw that you use. Finger down the side, check that the saw's in good condition. Line it up with the wood that you're going to cut. Bang on the line is fine for this one, okay, first cut. And then drag the saw back a couple of times just to get it started. And then lock your elbow in it. Keep your elbow straight. I always say to people, it's a bit like playing snooker. If your elbow's waving around whilst you're cutting or queuing up for snooker, then that line's never going to be straight. So keep that elbow straight and tucked into your body and start cutting along that line, right? Now don't fight against the saw. Let the saw do the job. Stop when you get halfway down the timber on your line like that. Now, here's the trick, right? Get your wood, pop it against the line that you've just cut and eyeball the other side. The other side on this one is slightly inside the line. So when I line up for my next cut, I still want to be able to see the line after I've finished doing my cut. So I cut down timber until I get halfway. Now, that is all I can do with a tenon saw. My next job is chopping out with a chisel. So, everybody happy so far? Fingers crossed. Right, so now, chisels come in different shapes and sizes. This chisel is perfect. It's our widest chisel in the box, and it's going to be used for chopping out a joint. You have to use it with a mallet. Now, a couple of things on safety with chisels, first of all. General rule is hands behind the blade, okay? When we chisel, we make sure we have nothing in front of the blade. It's very easy to slip. In that case, this very sharp edge is going to cause you a serious acute injury. So you be very careful, right? Okay, next thing, right? Hold the chisel securely and make sure, like I say, none of your hands are in front of the blade. Right, lean the chisel up very slightly, and don't try and do this in one go, okay? You have to do it in small bits. I've gone down about 1 centimetre. Aim the chisel up slightly, and I'm taking away timber towards the middle of the wood. So I'm making like a kind of sloping side to it. Now turn the wood around in the vise, clamp it again, and go from the other side. So what we're doing is we are making a kind of ramp in the centre of the wood. Now by doing that, you've got less chance of splitting the timber. Here we go back in again, chop this one. And don't try and do it all in one go, okay? Make sure the chisel is slightly pointing upwards. All right, be careful if you're doing this and there's somebody right in front of you, because they might get hit by some flying debris. And don't go crazy with the force, okay? What I'm doing is light, firm taps with the chisel, all right? I'm not trying to, show off my strength here. This is just trying to get the joint chopped out. Right, now, once you've got the bulk of the wood out, like this, go from the other side just quickly. Once you've got the bulk of the wood out, you're then able to flatten the bottom of that joint off. Now what I do with that is I don't use the chisel for that one. I'll show you the trick now. So this is called powering off with the chisel. Both hands on the handle, nothing in front of the chisel blade, remember? And what you can do now, because it's a nice sharp chisel, is you can use that, look, to just flatten off the bottom of that joint. Nice and neat. You can do that because the chisels are nice and sharp, okay? Nothing worse than a blunt chisel, right? Okay, so moment of truth then, now coming up for my cross halving joint will be whether the two halves of my cross halving joint fit together properly. Okay, so pretty good, look, no glue, no nails in that. It's just fitting together. Now it should be flush on the top. I do need to take those joints back a little bit further. But that's your cross halving joint, right? So remember the technique we use for marking it out. Remember the names of the tools, the tri-square, the marking gauge for marking out. I marked everything out using a pencil, not a pen. What else do we use then? So for cutting out, we use the tenon saw. And for chopping the joint out, we use a chisel, bevel chisel, this is called, bevel edge chisel, and a mallet, all right? And that's all the kit I needed for marking it out. Did I mention the bench hook? Bench hook's useful if you haven't got a vise, or if you have got a vise even, as a method of holding the wood whilst you're cutting it. If you're using a bench hook, you hold with your hand as you're cutting. It's quite a nice, easy technique for clamping your wood. Okay, I'll leave it like that for now. I'll come back and do another video that shows you how to do the corner halving joint, where we're going to be using the edge of the timber to cut the halving joint out. All right, well done. Use that information for your planning sheet.